Conservative MSP Murdo Fraser has been complaining vociferously about the fact that Police Scotland recorded a hate incident as a result of one of his tweets. But I'm going to be arguing that he actually hasn't got a leg to stand on in making that complaint. Also, the Scottish Conservatives are trying to portray themselves as the one party in the Scottish Parliament who opposed the hate speech law, and I'm going to be arguing that actually they didn't. Right, let's deal with them in reverse order. Did the Conservatives oppose hate speech legislation? Well, let's go to the whole bill for a start. Part of the bill was about hate crime. Now, hate crime is the idea that, if someone punches someone in the street because they're gay, that's much more serious than if someone punches an old lady in order to steal her purse. That whole concept we think is completely wrong in the Scottish Family Party. As far as I'm concerned, if someone's going to attack me, I don't really care about the reason. I just want them to be so scared of what's going to happen to them if they do that, because of what the police will do, how they'll be punished, that they just won't do it. The idea that different groups get protected differently is just wrong. But anyway, the Conservatives are right behind this sort of hate crime, biased policing philosophy. In their manifesto at the last Scottish election, they said they would ensure frontline responders are trained to support victims of hate crime. So going along with that ideology completely. Now, if you think about it, in Scotland, the SNP have introduced this thing where if you're under age 25, you get lighter sentences because your brain isn't really fully developed. And the Conservatives in Scotland are saying, oh, what a lot of nonsense. Oh, yes, we oppose that. Yet the Conservatives in England are now saying there should be lighter sentence for people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Exactly the same sort of ideology. The Conservatives have got no principles and they're just all over the place. Right, the other thing with the hate crime legislation is that sex was in as a protected characteristic, so crimes motivated by sexism would be covered. But the feminists said, oh no, we don't want that. We want a law so that men can commit sexist crimes against women, but there's no such thing as a sexist crime committed by a woman against a man. So, for example, if a woman stabbed a man to death while she shouted, I hate men, then that wouldn't be a hate crime. But if a man makes some sort of disobliging comment to a woman, well, that might well be. The idea that you have a law that only works in one direction like that, can only be committed by men, can't be committed by women, is absolutely, utterly ridiculous. And a moment's consideration should show that. So how do the Scottish Conservatives respond to that? They've been going along with it. Swallowed hook, line and sinker, not a flicker of dissent from that utterly ridiculous sexist law that is coming our way within the next few months, I would imagine. Now, when it came to hate speech, the Conservatives agreed with it in principle. They were basically saying we should have hate speech legislation, but they just quibbled over the details about it. Now, Adam Tonkin, the Conservative MSP who was chair of the committee that dealt with the hate speech legislation, I'm just going to play a bit of video from him. And here he is explaining that some other people, obviously not him, some other people think you don't need hate speech legislation because the answer to hatred is to allow more discussion and allow ideas to be challenged publicly, and that's the way forward. But obviously he doesn't think that. Here he is.
That isn't my view, but I wanted to read the view of those free speech lawyers and advocates and campaigners who take the view, which is very commonly taken in the United States, that the way to combat hate is with more speech, not less.
Now, also within the committees, the Conservatives put forward amendments, free speech protections, which were actually helpful. Obviously, we think the idea of hate speech legislation in general is just bad. But they were saying it's a good idea to have hate speech laws, but let's put more free speech protections in. So Liam Kerr made this proposal here. So he said it won't be a crime to reject concepts relating to transgender identity, suggest someone shouldn't go forward with gender reassignment, stating that sex is immutable biological characteristics, there are only two sexes, using the wrong pronoun, using someone's past name, etc. He said all those things shouldn't be hate speech, they shouldn't be illegal. And that was going through the system, going through the process in the committee, in the Parliament. But then what happened is the leaders of the 5 parties in the Scottish Parliament, including Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, they had a meeting together, the leaders, and they decided between themselves in a backroom deal to drop all of these freedom of speech protections, which was just utterly bizarre from the Conservatives. They had an open goal and they just, squandered the opportunity completely, capitulated entirely and withdrew all of these freedom of speech protections. So Liam Kerr, who put it forward, I'm now going to show you the video where he's been a good boy and doing as he's told by Douglas Ross and actually withdrawing all of these freedom of speech protections.
Convener, I shall not be pressing my amendments 81 and 82B today, but look forward to working with colleagues and stakeholders to make this bill as good as it can be.
I mean, that's a pitiful spectacle, isn't it? Right, let's go back to Adam Tomkin, Conservative MSP, chairman of the committee that dealt with the hate speech legislation. And this is him expressing his unhappiness about the fact that this has been stitched up in a backroom deal that's bypassed the proper parliamentary procedures.
It seems to me that a sort of conclusion has been reached behind closed doors with the parties represented in the Parliament, that the way forward is to find some sort of generic free speech clause based on, but not identical to, Amendment 103 in Liam MacArthur's name. And what I worry about this, I have to say, I really worry about this. Given that the problems we're trying to tackle are problems of vagueness and overbreadth. So I support the collaborative approach, of course I do, but a collaborative approach in lawmaking on a subject as sensitive and difficult as this, whereas Liam MacArthur said, we're talking at one and the same time about matters of fundamental principle and about some very vulnerable people. That lawmaking, that collaborative approach surely has to be in Parliament and in public, and not behind closed doors in rooms with party representatives talking only to themselves.
Now again, Adam Tomkin himself, Conservative, he wrote an article in the Herald, I think it was last week. He was saying that the hate speech legislation may yet be a success. So in what ways are the Conservatives trying to claim that they opposed this legislation? They didn't oppose the principle of the stirring up hatred law at all, but they're now trying to present themselves as the opponents of it. Now again, this bill was passed before the 2021 Scottish election. What did they put in the manifesto? Did they put in the manifesto that they're going to repeal it? No. Was it just that they forgot to say anything about hate crime and hate speech? No, because they did have a line in it: ensure frontline responders are trained to support victims of hate crime. So they did not say they were going to repeal it. Now, they voted against it at various points, but if you watch all the things in the committees, it's just bizarre that they end up voting against it, because in every other way, they seem entirely for it. It was the same with the smacking ban. You watch the committees, and the Conservative MSPs rule, yeah, they're just going along with it, go with the flow, not challenging it at all. Then it comes to the vote, and they vote against it, and you can see the other people thinking, what's going on? For the last few months, you've been saying completely the opposite. And that's the Conservatives for you. Now, moving on to Murdo Fraser and his tweet. He said, identifying as non-binary is as valid as identifying as a cat. And he tweeted that in November 2023, and it was recorded by as a hate incident by Police Scotland. When I say initially recorded, they're now saying they don't have a record of it. So it was a temporary record was made. Now let's have a think about that. So we've got Murdo Fraser, the Conservative MSP, complaining, basically trying to give the impression, look what it's like here in SNP Scotland. It's terrible what's happening here. Oh really, what's that like in England? In England, exactly the same system applied until June 2023. And the reason it changed in England was because of a legal challenge. And they basically had to change it. So they now make it that they only keep records of hate incidents when there's a serious threat to an individual. So we've got Murdo Fraser here bitterly complaining about what was Conservative policy until 5 months previously, and was only retracted as a result of a legal challenge. Again, was it in the Conservative manifesto to do away with these non-crime hate incidents? No. Now, I think this whole story with Murdo Fraser, it's absolutely critical to point out that what he's complaining about was Conservative Party policy until 5 months previously in England. But the media report the thing and fail to mention that. And I think from Murdo's point of view, to be honest, I think there is a degree of hypocrisy there as well. Right, just to finish on the topic of non-crime hate incidents, my case was worse than Murdo Fraser's. I mean, his tweet was a little bit edgy. My video that got classed as a hate incident was not, I would say. But the crucial thing, the hate report, the hate concern report, for my video was sent to my employer, and that makes it 100 times worse than just the data sitting on a police database going nowhere. It was sent to my employer without me knowing anything about it, which is utterly beyond the pale. I complained to Police Scotland, making a lot of the same legal points that Murdo Fraser has. Murdo Fraser's hate incident apparently has not been recorded for long term. Mine has. The Free Speech Union have been campaigning on behalf of Murdo Fraser on this issue. I went to the Free Speech Union, I was a member of them, and asked them to help, to go public, launch a campaign about my issue. But I heard from an insider at the Free Speech Union that they wouldn't do that because I was seen as too political. So Conservative MSP, they're not too political. Scottish Family Party, obviously you are. And the media, do they cover the most serious case, like mine? No, they'll go for Murdo Fraser's instead. Now, when my General Teaching Council with Scotland case was going on, there was a lot of media exposure for that. Did any MSPs jump to my defence, make any sort of public statement saying that the way it's been treated was wrong? Zero. Not a single one. But I will always do that. I'll always defend people who have been treated unfairly. So Murdo, was it right for there to be recorded a hate incident against you? No, of course it wasn't. We're against hate incidents completely. The whole system should be scrapped. Would you do the same for me? When I'm in hot water with regard to freedom of speech, would you speak up for me? Well, sadly, I expect not. Now, I hope at this point you're thinking you've heard some things in this video that are actually very important to understanding what's going on with regard to this issue. And where else will you hear those things apart from here on the Scottish Family Party YouTube channel? So do please subscribe. And a quick reminder, the Scottish Family Party's manifesto from 2021, we were absolutely explicit. We would scrap the non-crime hate incident recording system. We'd scrap the whole idea of hate crimes full stop, and also the stirring up hatred, hate speech legislation as well. We would repeal the lot. So if that's in line with what you think, join the Scottish Family Party. We would love to meet you. Thanks for watching.